I'm so excited to share with you something that a friend sent me. I just got it yesterday. Is a new article from the Scientific American. And, it's a long article. It's well written, and I think anybody could make use of it. It doesn't have a lot of technical language. But the gist of what they're saying is that when you give attention to your body sensations, that it improves your mental health, can take you out of depression and that sense of isolation and the, just kind of that depression that descends over people when they're not engaged, in expanding. And that they call it sense foraging, which I love. So rather what we used to do was to go out into and gather herbs and work in the garden, and it would stimulate all of our senses. We'd hear the birds, we'd feel the sun or the rain, and so we would have a sensory-rich experience. But post-pandemic, a lot of people have sort of lost touch with that ability to have their senses roam, and that by simply giving attention to your body sensations, you can recover. They call it touring your inner garden, and your inner wildness. And I love that because that's something that, Gay and I have been focusing on for, 40 years. So here's the science again supporting us. So it's very exciting.
It's funny how the science, I've noticed a lot of your work, we end up years later, science is now proving. It's like, yeah, we know. We've been saying it for a long time.
Yes.
It is funny how, so as you were talking, I was descending in my own experience because I thought that was really intriguing the way you were saying it. And immediately I was aware of the way my butt is on that chair, the fact that it's actually not feeling fully balanced.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just somehow, just the mention of it, I was able to immediately go and travel my inner village. So it's not that hard to get to, it sounds.
No, it's not that hard to get to. I think if you have some suggestions, some metaphors. I was remembering that when I used to practice as a therapist, there were two things that people would most commonly say to me. One was, I don't know how I feel.
Uh-huh.
And for that, I was taking feel to mean I don't know what I'm experiencing. When I give attention to myself, I don't know what's going on in there. And then the second one is I know what I'm feeling, but I don't know what to do about it.
Yes.
They thought that they'd have to do something about their sensations. And in fact, feelings, we now know, are really a bunch of sensations all grouped together. They're not any different than sensations. They're just sensations that move together. Like, they move in a river together, or they move, up over your shoulders together when you feel angry. So I just loved the validation that giving attention to ourselves has value. And giving attention to our whole body selves rather than just our mind selves or our scrolling selves, scrolling through social media self, has immediate impact. And one of the things it can do is interrupt that kind of, like I'm feeling depressed. And so I look at things that make me more depressed. And then, I withdraw from contact with other people. And so I just loved having that another affirmation of how our bodies are our friends.
I love that. And it is interesting how even I was doing a class not long ago about, it's called emotional resolution. And a lot of the work had to do with describing our sensations.
Yeah.
And so you without exactly doing what I didn't do, not doing exactly what I just did, which was to not necessarily attempt to change it.
Right.
Not breathe over it. Like, people, the minute they realize they're stressed, they're like, oh. But even that is like trying to change and control the actual sensation. But to be able to be like, I have a little bit of a tightness in my chest and my shoulders are feeling a little bit tight. And the work that he was describing is that the minute you have two, you had to be able to identify two so that your brain was actually no longer able to speak to it or describe it, but rather only feel it. I don't know if it's making sense, but
Sure, yes, because you get two of them and you drop out of the verbal and you
you
start
drop out of the,
experiencing.
that's exactly what would happen. You drop out of the verbal, and then your eyes would be closed, and then you would be just guided to be like, just do nothing, just do nothing. And you would notice, I started noticing that if it was a tension, not attention, it would start to resolve itself just by giving it a little bit of time and a little bit of attention. So it sounds like very aligned with what you just said.
Oh, and I'm so happy to hear that both people practicing, and really, like doing the research in the field with people, like, how are you experiencing this? But also, one thing that I've noticed, I love the thing about having two. So almost always when I'm having people experience, I'll have them tune into, like, notice some place that, feels tight or dense, and describe that, or describe it to yourself, or notice it. And now notice a place that feels more spacious.
Yes.
And now let your attention go back and forth between the two of them.
Yes.
And so there are all kinds of ways of opening up this amazing treasure chest that we have inside us of, our inner, what I call our inner landscape. And I love it that in this article, they call it your inner wildness,
Even
your
better.
inner
Yeah.
wilderness, so that there are discoveries there that, things that are popping up, that are not manicured or, or controlled. And our tendency as humans, and particularly in culture, when we see something, we have such a what's wrong orientation.
Yeah.
No, what's the problem now? And so that immediately when something comes up, we think, I got to fix it. I got to get rid of it. I have to override it. So the what we call being, in Be, Play, Love, being is not a passive activity. It's very active, of presencing with something that's going on. And it has that, the influence of dropping your awareness into your whole body wisdom rather than just your cognitive brain, which is a tiny part of your brain.
I was going to say, it's such an interesting thing that we do to ourselves. Society has whatever we do to ourselves is cut off one of our senses. I mean, we don't treat it as a sense, really, like, vision or hearing or being able to speak. It's not exactly perceived that way. But what's going on inside is such guidance. It's such wisdom that if you're able to listen to it, it's like you've added a color to your paint, right? You've just been able.
Well, I think you've added a continent. You've added a whole. You're a pioneer in your own life, and a lot of scientists now call what we're talking about right now interoception. Yeah. So it's into yourself, perceiving inside yourself. Yes. Which is. Which is another way of looking at it. But I it's okay to just say, noticing yourself, yes. Noticing what's going on inside you. And I think what gets cultivated from that, among other things, is what I call whole body thinking. Mm-hmm. So that you're receiving and then processing with your whole body, not with your brain, which tends to be much drier. Yeah. Gay often would use the metaphor of a grapefruit, that the brain is like a grapefruit, and that the rind is like your cerebral cortex, but the juicy parts are where the juiciness comes from. And your cerebral cortex isn't juicy; it needs juice from your body to be able to really have things to play with. And the other thing that was from this article, it was so exciting, is that when you do this kind of sensory interruption of the doom scrolling mindset, yes, it frees your brain to actually problem solve and to create. Because so you're not in that, merry-go-round, yes. And you do that without yelling at yourself and trying to stop yourself. Stop doing that. You simply shift your attention, and then that opens up your brain, which I just think is fabulous. So presencing is first locating myself here, mm-hmm. feeling myself here, and then noticing how I am interacting with what's going on around me right now. Mm-hmm. So for me, it is really like noticing my breath, which people hardly ever do unless somebody says, take a breath.
Yeah.
But if I'm breathing, then that opens an inner sense of space. And if I'm breathing, then I also have more space to notice what's going on around me. And presencing, one of the main things that I experience is that I shift out of any kind of fear.
Um,
So the main thing that I use, the fear melters that that we can talk about at some other time, is to move from that stuck place of stopping my energy, either in fight or in flee or freeze or faint. And when I befriend those, which I do with my presencing, which is basically I give attention to
yeah.
what is going on rather than running away from it or trying to stop it or control it. So I really think of presencing as being with.
Mm.
It's not just being, it's being with. So I think of being, like the monk who's being,
Mhm.
but when you go out into the marketplace again, what happens to your being when
Mhm.
you encounter all of the stuff that's going on and things that don't go right and stuff that breaks? And so being with is, for me, the quickest definition for presencing. If I can be with this, I can be with this emotion. I can be with this. Like I was just thinking yesterday. I was in the kitchen and we were doing Gay and I were doing our morning things together. I was giving tuna to the cat, and he was getting his breakfast, and I handed him the the cream, which we both like in our coffee, and I hadn't remembered to put the cap on the tightly, and so he was shaking it, and then he shook cream all over the floor. And so there we were, with
Cats were happy. The cats were licking
and
the.
the cat. Oh my! And so, in fact, actually, because I knew they would come running, and they would, it would make them sick if
Yeah.
they drink that much. So I was mopping it up, and I left a little bit on the floor for the cats to lick up. But that kind of thing happens. Stuff happens and
Mhm.
throws us off, or going, oh. And so being with. So I just took a moment to be with. Oh yeah, that happened. And instead of, blaming myself or getting mad, we kind of laughed. It's like, oh boy,
Mhm. There we
stuff
go.
happens. And it makes it so much more of a kind of a daily dance, like as we're going, the input, it isn't just me doing the things that I think I need to do in the day. It's always a dance with the unexpected that
Mhm.
happens over and over again. And so finding the way in that moment to be with, for me, is just an ongoing practice. And it's not something that you ever arrive at.
No, it's like an act. It's an action for us to come back to it and come back
Yes,
to it.
it's yes. And to renew, refresh the all of the re's that allow me to go, oh yeah, that happened. And here I am.
Mhm.
And here I am, and I can be with this. And sometimes it's harder to be with.
Yeah.
Something happens that's very sad, or I know, someone that I really care for is sick, or somebody I admire died. To be with that is, takes more of my noticing, and then being with the flow of feeling, being with the flow of thought, being with the flow of what I'm noticing going on with the person that I'm with.
Mhm.
And that's another kind of being with. It's kind of like skiing together with somebody,
Mhm.
or even
Birds,
just walking.
birds, the way the birds do that, like they
Yes,
meet each
yes, the
other.
murmuration.
Yeah.
Yes, that is a profound being with. And my sense is that the more I practice being with, the more skillful I get at, making the turns and opening and shifting, but also enjoying. So if I get present, it's like, I just
Static. Yeah.
ecstatic, I've landed. And also there's a sense of fear is going to come in right away because nothing ever stays.
Yeah.
And
So you're
so
going to lose it. So
I'm
you
going to lose it, and then I'm afraid I'm going to lose it, and then
yeah.
that makes me lose it. And so rather than, staying present, I really say, you're going to lose it, and then you can find yourself again.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I've never said that out loud on the show, but I think I'm going to say it for this one. If you have an opportunity to watch the video for this one, go on YouTube, because watching Katie, as she was talking about all this, I'm just doing a little side talk here, but go see the video, because there was so many descriptions and visuals and flowing with you. I was just completely hypnotized. So on this one, I would say stop whatever you're listening and go watch the video instead. This was
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
very
one of the
delicious.
things I realized too, for me, I can hear and connect deeply through listening and speaking. But for me, the you can't
Mhm.
really see how I'm moving.
Yeah.
And because I'm a mover, and a lot of what I communicate is through the way that I'm moving. So if you want to get the full treat,
Trust me,
watch.
you'll get this one. Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's funny because your face was also very expressive. Like, it goes fast. The way you were just saying, you spoke to being sad, but then you moved to being, it's almost like physically I could see you genuinely being in everything you were saying. And it goes fast. You don't have to feel like sadness doesn't have to be a thing that takes the day. You can
Right.
feel this sadness. And then, as you said, it takes a little bit more attention. I like the way you spoke to that. But also, there's no need to be there for a day. You can really switch to the next thing pretty gracefully.
Well, I also think that people don't really understand that it is the being with that opens flow.
Mhm.
And the flow, particularly the flow of aliveness, when I can be with even, sadness or anger, when I really be with it, then what I get is more aliveness.
Mhm.
And then I have more alive. It's like filling my reservoir of aliveness that I can then meet life with, and when I'm really stuck, how I notice that I'm stuck is that nothing's moving.
Yeah.
And being with creates movement and circulation. There's just so much now research, and your own experience is going to tell you that circulation is the most important thing that we can focus on with our presence, with our health, is that disease comes from stagnation,
Mhm.
and stuckness in our relationships comes from stagnation. So when I'm being with, that creates flow. And even if it's a flow of a feeling, or a flow of, hey, I didn't like what I
Mhm.
just realized
Chaos.
I'm
Yeah.
still mad at
Chaos
you.
is a flow.
That's
Mhm.
flow.
Mhm.
And our learning how to be with flow, I think, is one of our human skills really needed right now.
I love this idea that it's a thing you can have in your pocket or in your heart or whatever you store your
Mm.
things, but it really is a skill that you can learn, so that anytime you feel the stuckness, it's one place you can go. You can go to loving, you can go to watching something beautiful, you can go, but to have that as a base, to be able to say, oh wait, like you said earlier, like where am I? Where's Katie right now? Like what's
Yeah.
what's
Where
what's going
where
on?
where am I? And literally, if you practice this even just a little bit, you'll make yourself safer in the world, just moving through the world, because this creates situational awareness.
Mhm.
Where am I? Then also allows me to notice where everything else is around me.
Yeah.
Whether I'm in traffic, or whether someone's coming toward me, and there's something about him that's looks a little funny, or there's something like, oh, I really want to connect with this person.
Mhm.
And what I was realizing too, which is so much a part of me that I don't talk about it very much, but it's really the shifting of attention
Mhm.
that is the basis of presency. And so that I can notice me, and then I notice you, and then I notice me. I
Mhm.
don't get caught in, oh,
Mhm.
wow, over there, or I'm so in this, I just don't have any attention for anything else.
Mhm.
It's the shifting that it kind of primes the pump.
Mhm.
Also, it's like the bellows of aliveness. When you're shifting your attention, you get more energy, movement, aliveness, breath, and just from that simple thing of shifting your attention. Unexperienced and unexpressed feelings don't go anywhere. They tend to sabotage. They come out sideways, like getting irritable or snapping at somebody that really didn't do anything. So we misplace, we project. But I think the big thing it does is depress our life energy.
Yeah.
If we're not really feeling, and what I mean by feeling is not necessarily emotion, but sensing into, letting ourselves be impacted by what's happening, breathing with it, moving with it, letting ourselves experience. And I think more and more people, lots of people just don't experience. And so they need a lot of extra stimulation from outside to feel alive.
It's interesting because it's like what do you call them in English? Just catch 22.
It's a yes.
Because you don't feel the feelings, and so they go inside you, they numb you even more. So now you cannot really feel the feelings. So then you watch something on TV that's even more numbing you. And it's like a cycle of that it becomes a little bit hard to feel your feelings and to sense because so much is coming.
Well, and also just so much in order to get people's eyeballs, I think that also more drama is happening out there and coming at you and something, more exciting or surprising but it has that adrenaline factor of like, oh my God. I was just remembering way back when television was just really developing, in the 70s and the 80s, if someone shot a gun on television, it was like, oh, it was this huge deal. Or if
we weren't used to the sound of it, probably.
Right, the sound and all the action of it. And if one car like bumped into another car and there was they had a car accident, it was like, it was so dramatically like, today we're blowing up whole worlds and all of the sound effects. It is, I think, overwhelming for most people's nervous systems.
And probably the more, the bigger and the louder and the more of that you're going to need. It's like heroin, like people that do like a shot of heroin and then the next time they have to do more and then more, because otherwise they don't feel.
You don't get the hit. And
yeah.
I think, the thing that people don't know is that adrenaline is the most addictive drug on the planet.
And we produce it ourselves. It's inside.
Yes, we produce it ourselves. And I do think, when I've been caught in an adrenaline cycle, one of the things I notice is that my ability to feel anything else gets diminished.
Yeah.
So like the nuances of, like seeing a little kid skipping down the street and feeling the joy of that, it's like I don't see it because I'm in that, much narrower track.
Yeah.
And I actually think it's one of the biggest issues that's facing us because it's where you get your fuel. You get your fuel from connection and attention and collaboration and presence, or do you get it from adrenaline? And I think a lot of people get it from adrenaline.
So I think it's a recent thought that adrenaline is a drug and it's addictive. I'm curious, like, I think someone would say, I'm going to rehab because I drink. I mean, maybe not so joyfully, but, there is a place where you can kind of work on that. Like, what do you do?
Transform that or, rehabilitate.
Like, what do you do with your adrenaline? Like, what does one do to handle, because there's no rehab center that I know of.
Question. I was just thinking about as you were saying that, just before you were saying that, I was thinking, well, so what do we do about this?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, because otherwise, we're just on these gerbil wheels of going. Yeah. Well, one thing that was just occurring to me is that slowing down, is one of the most powerful things we can do to get off the adrenaline roller coaster. And what I like to do is to play with how am I moving through my day.
Yeah.
How am I moving right now? I mean, sometimes literally, like how am I going from one room to another, or how am I going out the door? And if I check and I'm out in front of myself, I'm in adrenaline. So for me, the first step is, okay, locating myself, right? Oh, here I am, and feeling my feet, feeling my breath. And when I do that, I immediately go, And almost the first thing is more out breath and more, whew, just a slowing down. And when I do that, I can actually feel my feels. I can feel into, sense into what's really going on rather than skipping over the top of it.
Which reminds me of what you were saying earlier, the kimono with the long sleeves, because maybe actually it serves you. Because if you were moving slowly with your kimono, you wouldn't be catching it on the doorknob, would you?
That is such a good point. That is, I think unconsciously, that's part of why I put on a kimono actually when I'm getting into the day, because I want to set up a pace that's going to allow me to be aware of where I am. Because it's one thing, the whole phrase of bull in a china closet. It's one thing if like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do and you're not going to get in my way. But if you actually want to have a harmonious life, it includes other people and your interactions with other people. And so that's a way of checking. It's like checking in, sort of, where am I? How am I? And where am I going? And those can be things that I can use to like establish a kind of a tuning fork or a place to come home to where I go, okay. So for me, it's doing some easy belly breathing and maybe wiggling a little bit or doing some fear melters so that I'm noticing where in my body am I more awake and where am I less awake. So right now I can feel like in the backs of my thighs, there's a little bit of like a little bit of sinking in. And so I thought, oh, what are my legs wanting to do? And then I can get, I'm interacting with myself as a friend rather than as my body is just a vehicle to carry me around.
Yeah, there's a way that we can. Someone used to say to me, like, there's days where the bear eats you, and then there's the days that you eat the bear. And I don't know why it reminds me of this in this moment, but similarly, I feel like sometimes my body does me, and sometimes I be my body. And there are very different days, very, very different days.
Very different days. And my experience is that I can shift that dynamic. Because I was also thinking there's a third way. So the bear eats you or you eat the bear, but the third way is that you play with the bear.
Yes.
So I think it's actually possible to play with the bear, whereas that is to, give attention to what's going on, to get curious about that, but also to just ask my body, what would you like to do? How are you feeling? What would you, and to give my body a chance to express directly, like by moving, by drawing, by making sounds. And then my body goes, oh, I'm here too. You're paying attention to, I have value. Rather than, okay, I've just got to do the job and carry you around. Because that's how we think mostly of our bodies as a problem.
Yeah. Or a vehicle, as you were saying.
Or a vehicle, or a vehicle that needs regular maintenance, like most.
Yeah. But what's beautiful with that is like a lot of things, if we cooperate with our bodies, then it's a complete ally.
Yes.
Right? Like I find myself, I don't get sick very often, but when I do get sick, I often notice that it's on the trail of like too muchness. Like I went out too late. I didn't sleep enough, like there's a trend that gets me there when, of course, on the other side, when I pay attention and I listen and I slow down and I feed it better, then it's what other ally do I have than this gorgeous thing that's walking me around? It's like such a shift, and it wasn't, as you know, always that for me. Like my very overweight body was heavy, and it was more of an inconvenience. And now that it's not, I see that it's like a partner. It literally is like a friend that's with me, as if me is something else. By the way, like is me? Do I have another me in there?
Well, that's a whole other fascinating subject is, am I my body? I was remembering in my graduate school way back, there was a professor who was really asserting, you are not your body. And there was this big discussion. Am I my body? Am I more than my body?
Yep.
Is my body just something that drops away? So the sense of there's me and then there's my body. And that separation, I think, is really, the beginning of the problem.
Yeah.
So here I am, in my allness, which includes my body sensations and my feelings and my thoughts, and my perceptions of other, and a whole bunch, but it's all me. Most people really do consider their body as like the automobile, and
Yeah.
they're the driver, and they're separate from their body. And so they just drive their body until their body begins to break down. And there was a famous quote by Thomas Edison, that the body is just a vehicle for carrying the head from place to place.
Mhm.
And so when we learn to listen to ourselves and find, how can I listen? How can I get the message from my body? Does it come in images, or do I hear something, or do I have a particular sensation that lets me know, oh, that's not a good thing? So a kind of contraction, or do I get scared? So really experiencing your body as your friend,
Mhm.
and being kind, because your bank is keeping very precise records,
Mhm.
about what you've deposited and what you've withdrawn. And when things get way out of balance, then of course you get really sick.
Mhm.
And one thing that I noticed over the years, because I used to have all kinds of, I'd get respiratory illnesses, and I remember one year where I just had to carry a Kleenex around with me all the time because I had allergies and all of those things. I studied it. And there was one point my folks took me to get, when I was a teenager, to get one of those allergy tests, and then they would poke your back. It was, one of those sort of barbaric things. They would poke your back with a little irritant.
Oh my
And
God.
I was allergic to everything. I was allergic to dust, household dust, and cat dander. And, for the cat dander, what I discovered was that had to do with who got the affection in our family,
Ooh.
that the cat always got more affection than I did.
Oh.
So my dad would have a cat in his lap and be petting the cat. I cannot remember ever being petted by my dad, ever.
Mhm.
But I had maybe 2 or 3 hugs, in my life.
Mhm.
So,
You were
those kinds
allergic to
of,
the cat. You were allergic to
I
the
was yeah, so I became allergic to cats. And now, of course, I have 2
right.
cats who, sleep
All
on
over
my
you. I
head,
know,
and
I know. They sleep on your face. You're probably fine with that now. Although you get affection from the cat. It's lovely now. You
yes.
get the affection. So in that vein, do you think it starts from a level of self-love almost? Like do you think the adventure of discovering what works for me, what doesn't work for me? Because I feel like a lot of people live life a little bit like automated, things are the way they are, until it breaks down, then they have.
Until it breaks down, and then they complain and like, "How? Well,
How did that
eh,
overnight? I got so sick overnight. I'm always like, overnight? Are you sure?
right,
Shall we
right."
crack? Shall we go back to what you were doing a few months ago? So yes. Do you think then, because I like this idea, I don't know if it's Edison who said that as well, actually, but this idea that when there's dark in a room, you don't turn off the dark, but rather turn on the light, right? So
Yes.
you
Yes.
replace it with a better. So in the case of this, maybe it's more building new habits that are light and life giving.
Oh, I totally agree. But what I was hearing from what you were saying is that the way that we give attention to ourselves
Mhm.
is, I believe, a reflection of the way people have attended to us
Oh, yes.
from very early on, and that we begin to think of ourselves and experiencing ourselves from the outside, like, oh, I just did something that made my mom frown. I should stop doing that. And those thousands of messages that we get that are basically about what's wrong.
Yes.
And because that's what our brain really selects for, to meet the threat. And so giving ourselves, I think the most important thing is to get curious about, how are you? Like you would talk to a really close friend. How are you? What's going on? What are you experiencing today? Oh, your throat is what's going on with your throat? It's a little phlegmy today. And but not like, hey, what's going on with your throat? And here you go again. And when you're ever going to get over that? Which the way that we have heard people talking to us, but particularly that all of that nonverbal of the way we're looked at, the way we're touched, the way that we're fed. There's actually research about it's called shaping, that if in the first part of life, in your first 6 months, your caretakers shape to you. If they shape to you, and you're squirming, they squirm with you, and you want to reach out, they support you in reaching out, and you want to be held, they really snuggle you. They're matching you and shaping to you. And
Mm.
that gives you confidence in building your relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
But most people, there was an amazing study years ago about schizophrenic mothers and their babies, and they did an analysis, film analysis in real slow motion. And what they discovered is that when the baby wanted to get close, the mother would push them away. And when the baby wanted to be to move away and be more
Left alone.
independent,
Right.
yeah, and it was all in these little micro movements. It wasn't obvious, like tossing the kid or anything, but it shaped this kind of, oh, my experience isn't right.
Yes.
The things that I want don't work. And so if we have that supported, like I'm thirsty, and then I get drinks. Oh, when I'm thirsty, I can have water. I can have something
Mhm.
that tastes really delicious. Then it shapes a different attitude toward, oh, I can listen to myself, and that really helps life to work.
Um, do you think becoming an adult has a little bit to do then with reclaiming? Because we don't have to be victim of that. I feel like I got a
Yeah,
good amount of what you just described. I don't think my parents were schizophrenic, but I definitely feel like my needs weren't super important. I'm a kid,
yeah, yeah.
Um, so do you think it's almost like adulting is not a word I love necessarily, but do you think it has a little bit to do with, I can actually take that back. I don't have to have that voice in my head. I don't have to be around people that don't care for my needs, which I know in my life I've done some of it. And as I evolved, that's why I was trying to compare it to self-love earlier, where as I'm
Yes,
loving myself more and more, like my own internal returning, caring
yes.
inner world, I would pick people. I'd attract friendships like you, people that are just naturally generous back. And it's just this beautiful flow of kindness, which hadn't started there. So it sounds like we can heal it.
I absolutely think we can heal it, and I think it comes from two parts, which was one, recognizing something that you learned. It's not something
That you
that's
are, that it's not.
yes, that you
Right.
are. It's something that you learned. Oh, I learned to reach for chocolate when I was disappointed,
Yeah.
and you go, oh, okay, so now I can learn something different.
Yeah.
And I think it's that simple, at a certain level. But I just love kind,
Hmm.
and treating yourself. Now, if I were being kind with myself,
Hmm.
what other choice could I make?
Yeah.
So kind and curious. I think those are the new wheels that can take you forward in a way. I know I'm still learning,
Mhm.
because also we change from year to year, in different times of life, and we need different things. So I can go, oh no, that's not working anymore.
Mhm.
Like I love chocolate, and I've always loved chocolate. But since I said, it's just really clear to me that sugar just doesn't work. And so I stopped eating chocolate as well. And what's been amazing is that I don't think about it.
Yeah.
I don't crave it. I don't, sneak it and put it under my pillow. Like I used to, I used to hide food, when I was little because, my mother was always concerned that I was going to get fat. I was not fat, but that was her delusion. And so I remember hiding peanut butter, in a cabinet behind the couch, and
Mhm.
nobody found it for like 6 months where it had become, a mold experiment.
I love that. Well, as we're wrapping up, so those words, curiosity and kindness, really, really resonate with me. What do we have that could be a helpful? How do we become more curious? Like, how does that even where do we even go to? We ask
Mm.
ourselves more questions, maybe? Do we?
Gosh, that's such a great question. Well, I found myself humming. So I think
Mm,
that's the first thing. So the that creates curiosity. And
mhm.
so, how can I most care for myself today? I would ask my own body, um, how will I know? How can you let me know that you have a message? So we often think of the intuitive as maybe a voice, but it may not come as a voice for people. It may come as an image, or it may actually come as words in or a scene that comes up.
Right?
I experience one of the designations for me is that it's intuition, is that it comes up from within.
Mm.
It doesn't come in from without. So now I may be responding skillfully or not to what's going on around me, and I'm learning from that. But the actual, what I call a download, that's coming directly from the universe, for me arises. So that would be another interesting question to ask is how is it going to show up? And to genuinely get curious about it. So, like when I was paying attention to my dreams, what I would do is leave a notebook open with the date and with a pen so I was ready to take notes. So I was letting my insides know I'm ready.
Ah,
And so there's the how will it come? How will I know? And how can I get ready? And so for several nights, it wouldn't come. Or if I'd go, "Oh, I'm going to remember that. Oh, that was
mm.
so big. I'm going to remember that." And then, of course, the next morning,
I
phew,
know.
nothing. And
Mm.
I even got myself, I have a pen that has a light on the end of it so that I can
In
write
the
in the
night,
middle
you
of the
can look.
night.
Oh, that's so smart.
Yeah, so this is really letting my intuition know I'm serious. I
Yes,
mean, I'm
I mean
intending
it. Yeah,
to
yeah.
I mean it. I
Yeah.
mean it. Like,
Yeah.
"Oh, it would be so great to be more intuitive." But, uh, I think that what gets in our way are a whole bunch of outer messages that we've learned, including, like, for me, "Oh, you're too sensitive," and I would say, "Oh, something is not right," or, "Oh, poo, poo." When other people go, "Oh, it's just," when they discount. So if you allow other people to discount your own intuition, then, it's not as accessible.
And I'm wondering if it does happen in childhood that we start to learn that it's wrong to listen to it, or that it doesn't even, like, it's not perceived as a valuable or legitimate source. Like if I were to say I have an intuition that I should do this, like I think I would have been laughed at in my particulars as a child.
Well, yes, or have somebody challenge you like, "Well, how do you know?" I mean, I
Yeah.
actually had someone I was I was with someone and we were trying to find some place in San Francisco, and I just knew it was there. It's like, "Oh, it's over here."
No.
And so this other person says, "Well, how do you know?" And sort of got all kind of,
Mhm.
boom, 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 with me. And I got, sort of curious. Well, how I know is that I know.
Yeah.
But having that question of, well, little girl, that's, where's your data? It's basically like, where's the
But the proof,
science or the
as the
proof or
the
yeah,
evidence.
or the cognitive. And so it actually took me many years to recover that intuitive voice because it just got,
It got
sort of,
shy, like it got,
yeah, yeah.
traumatized maybe even a little.
Yeah, I would say so because I think the other thing is that adults who have lost touch with their intuition can be scared by a little one knowing more than they do.
Oh, yes.
So like say, I can remember saying to my mother, why is why is our neighbor so mad all the time? And she was like, "Oh, you can't possibly ever say that when she's here, that's rude." So having the a knowledge of the world that comes from a different place
Mm-hmm.
can be dismissed. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, whatever. Mm-hmm. So then it sounds like maybe the start of it's almost like a relationship within ourselves. Like it's almost sounds like we
Mm,
have to go, if we're not connected to our intuition, like maybe some of the people that are listening may be sitting there going like, well, either I don't have one or it's been long gone. I don't think it ever goes away completely. I think sometimes it gets a little dormant and a little quieter because it's not been listened to. But maybe it is a relationship that we can invite, like you were describing, even
yes,
the journal
I
idea.
think that's absolutely true. And by getting genuinely curious, and asking yourself, and then asking for the message to arrive in a way that you can understand.
Yeah.
So that it's not coming in some other language,
Yeah,
or
some yeah,
from a picture of the cosmos, and then you're supposed to make sense of all of that.
mhm, mhm.
I have found that my inner self, my essence, what I would call my essence, it responds very well to me appreciating and being more leisurely in my approach and softer.
Oh,
The image that I sometimes use, of sitting next to somebody,
yeah.
and you're kind of swinging on a porch
Mhm,
swing, and you're
mhm.
just being together and then letting things arise rather than, how was your day? Well, how was your day? When you settle into space, is the word that's coming to me,
Mhm,
that the
mhm.
more inner space we can make, the more that intuition will rise up and go, oh, there's room for me.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like a muscle. It feels like if I pay attention, like, you know how lately, the past few years, I've heard a lot about gratitude journaling, like at the end of the day, say
Yeah.
which I think is beautiful. I'm wondering if there's almost a practice that one can develop of like, where was I intuition? What was that? Where was I intuitive today? And where can
Mhm.
I follow my intuition? Almost like an adventure. Like when,
Yeah, I love that, and also I'm just thinking about, like, 'cause, many of us have morning practices, like of, meditation or
yeah,
journaling or stretching, but if part of that were to be wondering about, I wonder how my intuition is going to show up today.
yeah, I
And
love,
one of the things that I noticed that I really have been attending to is, somebody's face will pop up in my
mhm.
mind, and it'll be somebody I haven't seen in a long time, and I now respond to that because I go, "Oh," I get ready to hear from them or to hear about them,
Yeah.
and it's turned out to be very reliable,
Maybe
you
you
know?
even reach out. Maybe the reason why their face popped in is because maybe they are having a difficult day, or maybe they could use a little love at this moment. Maybe that is one of the ways it tugs at us.
And I have found almost universally, so I'll text somebody and I say, "You just came into my mind today, and
Mhm,
so I just wanted to reach out and,
mhm.
and connect." And then I leave it open. I don't
Yeah.
go like, "What's wrong?" or,
Yeah.
but again, what I keep hearing is making space,
Mhm,
which
mhm.
sounds very simple, but our lives right now, I think, are so filled with stuff and
Yeah.
things to do and things to respond to and fear and, like, oh my God, the kinds of things that it can overshadow this quietness of your intuition.
The other thing that strikes me as you're talking is, as we know, the world comes as it comes. Like sometimes it is as we planned, and sometimes absolutely not like we planned. But I feel like the deeper our connection to our intuition, the more plasticity can be. Like it's almost like I feel like when I'm in my intuition, I'm partnering with myself. It's a collaboration that it tells me to trust and sit here versus there. Like it kind of helps me as the thing comes at me. I feel like my intuition is my superpower almost, like to be able to manage what's coming.
As you're describing that, I'm hearing a superpower, but also a very good friend,
Mm,
and a friend who is real, who is not pretend or not skipping over things. So a friend who really will turn toward you and go, "Hey, hey,"
mhm,
hello, hello,
mhm.
but won't yell at you. And I think that by responding in some way, so one of the things I might do if I get that intuition is for sure I'll write it down.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
if there's something, and I'll write it down in longhand because for me that wires up more of my brain. Now I might put it on my computer or, my iPad at a later time, but first I'll write it. So if I respond, I'm tossing back. Like I've heard from my intuition and then I respond to my intuition and that cultivates my relationship with my intuition. Most people think they live here in their heads and they just need to get their head from place to place and they have to have their being their
Being
head
on all
busy
of
with
that. Yeah.
interaction and letting that lead rather than opening up to your whole body intelligence, which is way smarter than just your head intelligence. And I found as I include more of me, I make smarter choices. I'm much more effective than if I just
Because your
dash off.
intuition, you're also inviting, by slowing down, you're also inviting, oh, my head seems to be wanting that way, but wait, what is this little whisper? And then you follow that, and all these
Yeah.
miraculous, magical things happen that would not have happened if you had let just this one. And I don't think you're saying don't engage your head. I think we're saying engage all of it, like make sure,
Yeah.
right? Because we also don't want to be walking around like we're just bodies, just doing whatever the body says, right? Are you saying that? That sounds fun.
Are you saying that? That we're just bodies? They're not. But there is a great scene in an old movie with Robin Williams where he plays the King of the Moon and he has his head literally on a plate and his body is wandering around by itself. And it's the most hilarious. It's the Adventures of the Baron von Munchausen for any of you who might want to watch this wonderful scene because it really is about the fight between the head and the body. And he talks about how the body is disgusting and how the head is where all the brilliant and important parts are located. And I think that many people could actually relate to that. Of course, of course, that's how it is. But when we actually include the body, we get particularly those intuitions because your body wisdom doesn't yell at you. I think our heads yell at us.
So it has more, it has
What
the
did you do?
attention.
What did you do? Why did you do that?
Yeah.
How long you're going to, and the critical and judgmental, because that's the part of the thinking function is to discern, to go, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. That's not very wise, or I'm going to do this first. But if we don't have information that's accurate, that's coming from our body wisdom, we make stupid choices.
How fascinating. And it's funny that you quote Robin Williams, because I would say of all the actors, maybe it took someone that aware of his body, because talk about someone who was in his body and was so, just giving
And
everything.
that's where his creativity came from because these
Exactly.
impulses would come up and he would just go with them. It was the brilliance of his brain to be able to sort all that. But I'm sure that his opening up to playing with his body and then of course playing with others and playing
Yes.
with whatever came up
Yes.
was part of his brilliance.
Why do you think we had, because as I'm speaking, I'm realizing that my feelings are occurring in my body. Like I don't
Yes.
think my feelings, right? I feel my feelings in my body. Do you think that's partly why we've kind of selected to not be as in it? Because therefore, if we don't, then we don't feel the feelings as much, which some of them are sometimes hard to feel.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And we also know that your feelings, the actual sensations from your feelings get to your brain 4 to 10 times faster. So your sensations are quicker than your thoughts. So your
Okay.
thoughts are always behind what's happening, what's actually happening. And if you don't include that, then that I think is the biggest disconnection. I think that for 2,000 years, we've been taught to be afraid of our feelings.
Yes.
To
Stuff
be
that
like,
away.
uh-oh, stuff it down, control it. Uh-oh, bad. If you go into your feelings, you're going to do something,
Crazy.
embarrassing or
Crazy.
awful.
Mhm.
Yeah. And the job of the mind is to control the body, which is, I think, a lot of what's gotten us into all of the problems that we have today, because your feelings are basically your inheritance from thousands of generations of people whose choices have worked.
Yeah.
And like when you're out in the wilds, like you're out in the wilds of the freeway, or you're out in the wilds of being at the grocery store where there's all this stuff going on. It's not your thinking brain that is really making the choices. It's your body brain. And if we let our body brain be valued and listened to, and one of the things that I learned that just has made this huge difference is that my body brain doesn't yell.
Wow.
So if I'm hearing yelling, I know it's not really coming from my essence self. It's
Oh,
coming from my learned responses to the world. And often they'll be my intuition is very quiet. It's
the
kind of
whisper. Mhm.
it whispers, and learning to listen to that, I think, is one of the most valuable things that anybody can do.
In wrapping this up, I'm having this sense. Tell me what you think about this, but not including our bodies in our decision making or choices we make. It would be a little bit like I can see with my eyes, therefore I should not use my ears. Right?
Right.
Like it's almost like I should remove one of the senses or two because I'm using this other one. It's like, why would we not use our brain and our bodies and our gut and it's like, what has happened to us that somehow we feel like we cannot have the holistic whole experience of being a human?
Well, I
Like,
think there's a very simple to answer to that, and that is fear. That people have been encouraged to be fearful. And again, when you're fearful, you can't think.
mm,
But if you haven't used your body, your body wisdom is not available. So people tend to get just very reactive and very like mudslinging, and which is they fight, which is an expression of fear. So that's why I think that befriending fear,
mm,
really getting acquainted with fear, loving ourselves being with when we're scared, and like when we had an earthquake a little while ago, and just being with that rather than thinking, well, I shouldn't be scared, it's just an earthquake. Scary stuff happens, and to be able to be with fear and befriend fear, I think, is one of the biggest tasks of our time.